Hello, hello. So I am here with Hazel, who is an author and life coach. I'm really excited to have her on today's podcast because she has a really beautiful perspective and she is a fellow Syrian, which of course I love. Hazel, tell the audience a little bit about yourself outside of your career first.
Awesome. So, first of all, I do want to say really thank you so much for having me on today. I'm super excited. So, outside of me being a life coach and author, I am involved in a lot of humanitarian stuff. I've actually been doing that my whole life. Really, throughout my childhood, it was more so through the church. So, I would like to consider myself a pretty religious spiritual person, but I have dabbled in spirituality when it comes to Buddhism. Like I'm a part of a hiking club in the Lehigh Valley that is more so Buddhist based, although you don't have to be a Buddhist to be a part of the club. Which is really cool because I get a lot of different perspectives from that. It's really nice to see people from different walks of life and being able to connect with individuals with such a deep understanding of life and nature and on all different levels. So I'm part of like hiking clubs. I love to do that in my free time. We do that once a month. And like I said, the humanitarian, so I'm part of a nonprofit, and it's also another Syrian nonprofit. So I do like to involve myself in things that make me human, things that remind me about what it's like to be a human being. I feel like we got so caught up in the technological age, and although these things are all blessings and it's such an incredible like advancement that the human race has made, we tend to get disconnected from what really makes us like one another. So I try to be involved in these types of events, community events and things like that as much as I possibly can. On an individual level, I'd like to think of myself as a little bit of an overachiever, kind of a perfectionist in some ways, but I'm really working on breaking that like real bad. So, but other than that, as I'm an oldest daughter in an ethnic household, so I feel like that might tell you as much, probably more than anything else. And I am an Allentown alum, GRF alum, born and raised in Allentown, so I will rep 610 all day. And that's pretty much it. I like to stay active, I like to be involved, and yeah, so this is me basically.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
What really got you involved in so many different humanitarian projects?
All right. If you want do you want the deep dive psychological reason why I got involved, or like the basic reason? So I'll give you a little bit of an overview. So I got involved in humanitarian things because it was something that I felt like I could fix. Something I wanted to do something. I wanted to contribute. I wanted to be a part of something. I've always wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself, and I found such a reward. Like it was a very selfish reason to get involved in like humanitarian things. So anytime something happens overseas, primarily overseas, because that's something that I felt like I was really super connected with on like an emotional level and on a personal level as well. But when it comes to like humanitarian events, like within the community, it was the church. It really was. Like I grew up in the youth group and I was a church kid my whole life. I'll always be a church kid. So really getting involved in like homeless dinners, going like being candy striper at the hospitals, things like that. Like we did that all growing up. Again, it was something that I felt a part of. It was bigger than just me, and I liked feeling like a small fish sometimes. Like even though it's just like small fish, big pond, you're making some moves, you're making some waves. So I felt really like connected and pulled to do something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
So, is there something deeper that you feel like kept you going through all of this?
I would say so. I mean, like I've heard your podcast before, and I think you touch on it a lot. Like just doing the work, like that shadow work, that self. Like I found a lot of myself in the work that I was doing. So like again, for selfish reasons, it was more like, you know, why do I get triggered by certain things? And working in like, for instance, like the soup kitchen and stuff like that growing up, it was more of like reminding myself that my problems were not as bad as I thought that they were in the grand scheme of life. So it was teaching me lessons, like life lessons, and I found myself continuously going back. So I was like, there's things that I need to learn. There's things that I need to learn about myself, about the way, society works, the way that community works, family. And I was learning that along the way. And I think that's the reason why it kept me going back, because I got that rush of dopamine every time I got that lesson, or that I something clicked in my brain. I was like, yo, what else can I learn? This is cool. So I think that's what kind of kept me going back. Again, I'll be the first one to admit it wasn't for the glory. I wasn't doing it for I will always say glory to God always, but it wasn't for some self-actualization purposes. Although I think that was a great byproduct of it. It was more for the soul, really, I felt like.
Yeah. It's interesting that you use the word selfish, oh, I did this for selfish reasons. Because I think depending on really how you perceive it, everything we do in some sense is selfish,
right,
even when it's not selfish. So it's
oh,
I'm giving, and why am I giving? Because it feels good to me.
Right.
And so
right.
it's kind of funny, no matter how you spin it, it's everything you do is selfless and selfish at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is just the duality of life, which makes it always interesting and fun.
Yeah, and the duality I think is a cool thing that you bring up, because that was a lesson that I felt like I learned much later. I didn't learn that growing up. I was still in a very egocentric, if I were to I got into esoteric knowledge later. I would say within the last 2 years or so. I started opening up the possibility of truth. Let me put it that way. So the idea of duality and as above so below, as within so without, those types of things I learned much later in my spiritual progression. So I consider myself religious and orthodox by identity, and then by on a more soul level, I'm a student of truth. So do I believe that there is truth in and I don't want to get too religious or spiritual here, but it's a moving factor for me. So it's the thing that keeps me moving forward, is understanding and staying grounded to what created me and what formed me, what shaped me as an individual, was that aspect of religious, organized religion. And then spirituality, as I continue to become a student of life, I started realizing no, there's some truth here. It's the law of duality, the esoteric laws, or the laws of nature, for instance. Those types of lessons I learned much later in my own journey, and even outside of formal education. So, but that one's top 5 for me. Law of duality is top 5, because it gives you a really great understanding of balance.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. A lot of what you said about, okay, this is how I was raised, these are the beliefs I was brought up around, but there's a part of me that was curious, that really grew into wanting to understand it on a deeper level for myself, and how there's more perspective out there that we're not necessarily shown, or we don't have the ability to see until we start to get out there and explore the universe. And when you are in these raised in these smaller circles, it's hard to break out of it, or be the one that gets curious and is okay with being the one that's curious. And I would love to hear your experience with that, and if you felt any opposition to that curiosity.
Oh yeah, I definitely did. Yeah, for sure. I totally felt lots of resistance to curiosity. I felt really wrong morally. I felt this was not something that I struggled with, trying to find and establish my own moral compass outside of the things that was instilled within me, things outside of the things that I knew to be right or wrong. So and then realizing when I got older that my curiosity kind of led me into for instance, right now I read the Quran, I read the Torah, I study Eastern philosophy, I study Buddhist principles and Stoic principles, and a lot of the things don't necessarily align with the way that I was brought up, and especially because of what's happening to our home country and things like that. So knowing some of the socio-political aspects of it, when I started delving into more of understanding the religious side of things, I did feel there was a lot of resistance there, definitely, for sure. I felt you know, sometimes I was like, whoa, am I doing the right thing? Like, is this curiosity leading me to the right, like, am I opening the right doors here? Sometimes I would find myself going down rabbit holes. I'm just like, this doesn't feel authentic to me. So I would kind of like back away. And that's when it's really important to like really take stock of that curiosity. I think curiosity is beautiful to a point, and then sometimes you kind of get lost in it, and you get lost in like, okay, but if you're asking questions, there's infinite questions to ask. Like, we got to get real granular. Like, so I do think that that's the part of like that self-development journey that I had to really get disciplined on. And I really had to like be very clear with my vision. Like, why was I curious about certain things? And that's when I started to ask myself, like, why is this even interesting me? Why do I even want to know about this? Like, there's some things you don't want to know about. I'd rather not know. So kind of like honing that back in and being like, okay, well, what's the most authentic to me? I can tell you for myself, like I got into like crystals. I did get into like tarot readings. I got into like, was like really deep in like astrology and things like that. And I respect the history of it, and I respect it as something other than myself, right? So like, I respect that the history of astrology has been around long before mathematics, and it's been long before organized religion. And I understand that, and I study it, and I study it as a scholar. I would like to consider myself like a study as a scholar, not somebody that internalizes it. And then when I got into like the crystal, I was like, oh my God, these crystals aren't working for me. And then I realized, okay, well, it might not be, because I might have some blockage within me that's telling me like, this isn't authentic to you. And maybe down the line, I might get more like understanding of certain like frequencies and energies. And again, I understand it's all natural, and it's from the ground, and it's from, you know, it's from God. God created this, so like use it to your disposal. I just didn't have the knowledge nor the patience and the understanding to learn the things that in an honorable way to do justice for these teachings. Like, I just didn't believe myself that I was doing justice to them, so I just let them go. So there are things that I know that down the line I might learn them, but right now I'm not in the place to like dedicate the necessary understanding for these things. So I think to kind of answer your question, yeah, like you do have to kind of hold yourself back from that curiosity. Sometimes it depends on what it is though.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. I think when you are someone that just naturally is curious and you like learning about things, and I also agree with you, like I think of myself as like a lifelong student because I just love to like learn about new things. And I think it does confuse a lot of people because it's just a curiosity to me. Like, you really have to explore different perspectives to know that the one that you currently have is the one that's most in alignment for you.
Right, yeah.
And I think a lot of people tend to be very closed to even hearing the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to question them, then there's like this frustration. It's like, okay, well, why do you believe what you believe?
Mm-hmm.
Like, have you ever played around with the possibility of this?
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's funny, this is like the 50th time crystals came up this week.
Sorry for bringing it up.
No, like it's like showing me there's a synchronicity here. Like, there's a reason this keeps coming up. But I think I like wrote a post, and it was really weird because I don't know what happened with Instagram, but like no one saw it. Like, it was just so strange, but you know, that's the Instagram algorithm. Who knows why that happened to happen. But yeah, my thought is like, so many of these things, like so many different religions and cultures and backgrounds and how you were raised, they're going to influence like how you perceive these things. Mm-hmm. And so I think, like you said, like God created all of this, even technology in a way. Like, mm-hmm. He created us who created this thing, right? So nothing is really inherently good or bad. It's your decision to give meaning to the object and to use it in a way that's either going to get you closer to this path of spirituality and truth, or it can also be a tool that's used to derail you.
Yep, 100%.
And like that's up to you to make that decision, which way you're gonna walk with a thing. And like, you might walk in the wrong direction for a while because you're trying to learn, you're trying to understand, mm-hmm. and you're curious, but eventually you have that self-trust to be like you said, like, I know when to stop. Like, right. I know when I'm walking down a path that doesn't feel good, and you just have to trust your intuition in those moments to just like let you know it's time to stop. Like, for me, my brain quite literally hurts when I'm like, I'm getting really lost. I feel like like quite like I really would say it feels like the sensation of like I am losing my mind by
Yeah.
going
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
deep into
Yeah,
this
yeah.
thing.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, okay, come back, because it's easy, and it sounds like maybe you can relate. It's like you get so deep into something to the point where we have to like pull ourselves back and be like, okay, life also is not this complicated.
Right,
It
right,
doesn't
right,
like
right.
sometimes you just have to exist
Mhm.
and not think too hard about these things and just enjoy the human experience for what it is.
Yep. And I think too, like, one thing that really has helped me is like this understanding a little bit more better of the masculine and feminine energy. And the reason why I want to bring that up is because that's what helped me understand of whether or not I was resisting too much. Like when I realized, when you said sometimes you just have to be, like when I started learning that feminine energy is more about being than it is about doing, and I found myself like I'm just doing the most, like I'm doing too much. Sometimes when I find myself like that, I'm like, maybe my energy's off. Like my actual, like that duality, that yin and yang energy, that masculine feminine energy, when I found myself in the yang too much, I knew I was out. Like I knew I needed to put a break on whatever I was doing. Like it should not be this hard. And truly, life is that simple. Like sometimes life is that simple. Are there aspects of it where it's like, and I don't want to discredit or dishonor all of the plight that women have gone through, both in our home country and in our country here, that have paved the road. Like they, what is it? They walked so we could run, that type of, yeah. So like I don't want to discredit them from that, but sometimes I do find myself like, I find myself so far into this like doing energy that it really throws everything out of whack. Like my sleep's off, my nutrition's off, everything's off. Like it's when I start noticing like mind, body, soul is all happening at the same time. My opinion, right? So like it's all happening at the same time. If I can't understand why one aspect isn't working, I check the other ones. Like if this is not working for me and I can't figure out why it's not working, then something else in the other levels or phases or sections or whatever of your life is off. And that's when I started getting more into like understanding like, okay, feminine energy. I started getting into booty yoga, right? So like I saw you in a couple classes, which is super cool. And I went to like the classes in Bethlehem as well, which is like awesome. So and shout out to Tina, because she's the one who put me on. Like she's awesome. I love her. But like when I started getting into that type of like feminine flow and like feminine power, I was like, yo, this is so cool. Like I love this. I've never been a lifter. I never, like, I would love to one day, inshallah, be a lifter. Like, I think it's so cool. I admire it so much, but like, it's just not, I'm more of a cardio girl. Like, that's just what I do, right? So like, when I found that like booty yoga is more about like that like embodiment of feminine power, feminine energy, I was like, this is awesome. And so I was going to that for a while, right? And it kind of like, and it'll come in waves, it'll come in seasons. Sometimes like I'll find myself really in that doing energy, and sometimes I needed to be more in the flow. And I would get out of that doing energy and just like let things come to me and like be in that receptive mode and just like allow the universe to show up for me sometimes, and not me having to prove myself over and over and over again. It's like I've done that, like been there, done that, we're good. Like, so I don't know. I just feel like it really does get to the point where when you take stock of your masculine and feminine energy, you could recognize it better when these triggers or these things come up in your day to day, because they will, and they'll never stop. Like you could be, and this is me as a life coach, right? So like you could be the best life coach on the planet. You're still a human being, and you're still going to go through your seasons, and you'll have your seasons of the L. Like that will always come. Like sure as the sun will rise, that will happen. So like how do you deal with those things? That's the question. It's not how do we stop them from happening, it's how do we better manage them. So that's kind of where I've gotten into like more understanding Stoic philosophies and reading the Stoics and like the Greek philosophers. They've done honestly like so much for my mental health I can't even explain. Like it's been able to kind of keep my masculine energy at a good energy, good level, just by learning, just by studying, just by like being a nerd and just like learning different philosophies and principles and stuff. So I think that's the aspect of learning how to stop that overwhelming feeling is getting better at handling them, honestly.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of really good points there that I really agree with you. Like the principle of masculine and feminine energy, that's a really big one that people, I think there's just a lot of confusion around that and what that actually means. But when you take the time to study it and really understand from like a spiritual perspective, or even, you know, if you want to throw in the Western side of the theory, like you can really find a lot of balance by thinking about your life in that way. Because it's just like that, where, you know, we're kind of, and it's tough for me. I try to think about like, does it come more from Western culture, or is it coming from like the background as being like a first generation American? I think there's like different parts that affect it. Like both sides, I think, kind of influence that. But yeah, there's a part of it where we're kind of taught to like keep pushing, keep moving forward, don't slow down. Like that shows weakness. You got to keep going. Like you have to make it happen. It doesn't just happen for you. And I think it, you know, I see it in like people who are deeper in our culture, or like more like, you know, fresh off the boat type stuff, where it's like it's that thought where you have to like keep doing and serving in order to show like that you're worthy, or that you can yeah, like either side of it, where it's like, oh, the woman like cooks and cleans and does all this stuff all day, and she's like constantly running around, and now it's like you throw in, well, she actually also has a full-time job, but she's still responsible for doing all these things. And so you see that, and like these women just don't slow down. And I feel like even in our culture and Western culture, like both cultures, I feel like we have that mindset where it's like, okay, the woman is expected to work full-time, yet there is still a lot more with the responsibilities being on her side in terms of like housework, taking care of the children, and all this stuff. Because I do think there's certain things that we just will naturally gravitate towards, but we're still also trying to like live the way we think we're supposed to in this like fast-paced lifestyle. Because I mean, like for example, like I love cooking and I want to do that, and it's something where like, yeah, like regardless of how much I work, like I'm always going to choose to do that. But then you just keep piling things on, and you start to get away from the things that you actually really like, because you feel like suddenly I have all these obligations. And like you said, sometimes it's just a matter of like, okay, I need to pull back. Like I'm way too far into my masculine, and I need to bring in back some of those elements of the feminine to let myself just be, and let some of this just flow, and realize all these things that I'm doing don't necessarily need to be done. And then being okay with yourself in the being state, because that's really hard when you try to make that transition from going from overdoing all the time to letting things flow. It's like your nervous system is not calibrated to let yourself just be yet. So it's a lot of conditioning that you have to work through in that too.
No, I definitely see that for sure. I think too, being I will speak on being Syrian American, but I would like to make the very broad statement that a lot of people from collectivistic societies kind of feel the same things that we feel, especially if you are first generation. I think specifically not for any other reason other than like there's a lot of pressure on us to make it because our parents didn't make it in that way. So like obviously coming from a society where, you know, job resources are very limited, from countries where you really only have 2 or 3 career options to make it, and 2 or 3 career options to become successful. And then you come to America and they didn't make those sacrifices for nothing, right? So like they come here with the mindset of like, you need to go to college, you need to go get this done, I need you to have a 6-figure job, like you need to go do these things. And we're constantly in this state of needing. And which is what like, and I do get into like that spiritual kind of talk of like, that shows the universe that you're in lack of, right? So like that constant, like I'm in lack, I have to do this, I have to go to college, I have to be successful, puts not only so much pressure on us in general, masculine or feminine, like male or female, like not only that aspect of it, but on an individual level of constantly feeling like there's not enough, this scarcity mentality, this like, it's very overwhelming, honestly. And like being that person, just like my parents didn't sacrifice their entire life for me not to make anything of myself. And so if you're not making something of yourself, you feel like you're not only failing yourself, you're failing your whole family, and you're kind of like not honoring their plight, and you're not honoring the sacrifices that they made because you're not successful. So it's this constant like hamster wheel of like, I have to do and I have to do because I want my parents to be proud of me. I don't want their sacrifices to be for nothing. Like, again, we can speak on the Arab community because we know it, we live it, we've been through it, and we're a lot of us are still living through it now. But like, I would go as far as to say that a lot of people from like collectivistic societies feel the same. People who like their parents are dependent on them. Their success is a reflection of their parenting, right? So like we can look at it through parenting lenses, and like just like keeping that in mind as well, of like your parents, their success as raising good children is whether or not you become successful. And that's how they measure their self-worth, because they haven't had the opportunity to self-actualize. Whereas we in the West, in this abundant nation, have the opportunity and the blessing to come out here and be like, I'm going to self-actualize, and I'm going to try all the theories, and I'm going to do it this, and I'm going to explore everything. Whereas like then they're just like, you have one road to walk on, and if you go left or right a little bit, your whole family is going to crumble. Like, so they were tasked with just the task of survival, whereas we're tasked with like self-actualization, and it's stressful, it's overwhelming, it's scary, it's something that nobody can guide you on. Your parents can't guide you on. Like, my dad loves music. I'm sure in another lifetime he was some like orchestra instructor or something, but like and he'll sing and like all this stuff. And I'm not saying he's the best singer. I love your dad. I'm not saying he's the best singer, but like he loves music, and like that's his, you know, connection to the divine and like all of this stuff. But it's like, was he ever able to actualize that? Was he ever able to like put that into practice and like go to the opera houses and do things, which I know this is something that he would love to do. I would hope one day that I can give him the opportunity to do that. I would hope, and same thing, I'm sure everybody would feel the same, but like this is where that pressure comes from. And I feel once we are the first ones to do it, it becomes overwhelming because we're battling between being American and being Syrian, or being, you know, like American and Mexican, or American and, you know, Puerto Rican, whatever it is. So like you're battling two different identities, and it's that constant pressure. And especially because like the cooking, the, you know, the home making, the child rearing, all of that is in our nature. Like, and I'm not going to sit here and like get into the biology of things, but of course, like you have a natural inclination. It's creative. It's a creative energy to cook. It's creativity. You're creating something that was nothing into something. That is the most like connection that you could ever have. And everybody eats in this planet, right? So like feeding somebody, it's like reaching your heart through your stomach, and you can go on and on and on, right? So many analogies, but like it's such a natural creative act to do, is to cook. And for it to be just reduced down to like feminine energy is just such a dishonor to what it is in essence. But the fact that we're seeing it as you should, like it's the shoulds that kill us, honestly. It's like you should cook, or you should clean, and you should have a child, and you should get married. No, it's I want to. I would like to do these things. Like I have a burning desire to do that. Not because society, it's not from society. This is from me. This is from my God put this in my heart. This is not from society telling me you have to go cook jadra or whatever, right? So it's not from, you know what I mean? So these are the things that like I feel get lost in translation, especially as someone navigating in a Western world with Eastern or Middle Eastern values, right? So we're trying to find that balance, and it's not just masculine and feminine. It's Western versus Eastern. It's, you know, yin versus yang. It's like all of the things, and just trying to find that homeostasis throughout every stage of your life is, I think, the biggest for myself, for my friends, and for my clients. Like I see it all the time, and that's everyone's always the number one thing, is like trying to find that balance.
Yeah. Again, a lot of really good nuggets in there. And yeah, I mean, I feel like there's just a lot to say around kind of like what you said with I'm like having a brain fart. I was like on something. And
sorry,
I was, like,
sometimes I go on a tangent and I'm like, you gotta stop me. You gotta be like, girl, too much.
No, I'm like so into it, and I was like, you said something. I'm like, okay, bookmark that. And I'm like, what was it? And I thought as I spoke, it would just come back to me, and I'm like, no. I'm like,
it'll come up later. It'll come up later.
Right. Yeah, it will come. But one thing I do remember is like I really liked what you said, like, okay, God, like put this in my heart. Because there really is, like, I think, like, even coming back to the word truth that we used earlier, to me, like, I see like everyone's truth is like their own. Like, I don't know if I necessarily believe in like, okay, this is the universal truth. Like, I think there's like with natural law and some of that I do kind of see where there's certain basic principles that I would hope most human follows, but at the same time, like, even when bad things happen, to me it's like, how do I know that it wasn't planted in this person's destiny to follow this? Because like, while I do believe we have choice, I also believe that certain things like we're destined for, no matter how we try to run away from it or navigate ourselves around it. I do believe that there's just certain things that are like in our minds that we can't let go of.
Right.
And like, I don't have a logical reason why, other than just being like, God put it there. I can't, like, certain things, it's like, I don't know, like, why do I like chocolate ice cream? I don't know, like, I didn't, just like certain things where it's just like, I don't know why I feel really compelled to like be a life coach. It's like, it just feels like this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so it's just like being confident with like walking in that alignment and that truth and being like, okay, regardless of where I came from or where I'm at, I can give myself permission, or like eventually I like really want to give myself permission for some people that might not be fully there yet, to be like, okay, I understand, like once I kind of heal the scarcity versus abundance mindset and really allow myself to like enter into that space where I can let myself navigate my mind and my spirituality, it's like once you heal that, then it's like, okay, well now I need to follow this path that's like becoming more and more clear to me. But I do really like what you said with that, because it's so true. Like, our ancestors, they're conditioned, like they had to focus on survival. So then you just took them from that mindset, planted them in another country where they have all sorts of barriers to try to navigate. And that mindset, you have to like alter that so you don't keep passing it on to your ancestry. And I feel like we're the generation that can really start to see that and start to actually heal that, so it doesn't continue to be passed down, so that we can reach higher levels and accomplish things that maybe like our ancestors can't understand, because they're operating from a different place than we are. And so I think it's also just like remembering to give them grace, because I think it's easy to get like mad.
Yeah, that's the word. That's the word. Grace is the word for sure. Like, I see it day in and day out, like again with people who are my clients and people who are just my friends, and I try to remind everybody that like you don't know what you don't know. Like, our parents, there's a lot of deprogramming that needs to happen, right? So like in any self-wellness journey, self-actualization journey, there's a lot of deprogramming. When you grow up in an environment that is extremely sheltered, and not sheltered in the way of, you know, everything was handed to you and they did the best with what they could for the most part, and that's the reality for a lot of people. But when I say sheltered, I mean like it's definitely survival mode. So it's like you can't trust this person, you can't trust this person. It's like you can only trust your immediate family, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, and you kind of built that network of, to the point where like my grocer's era, my doctor's era, my lawyer's era, my teacher's era, like, and you stick to the same area. You're not allowed to have sleepovers, you can't do like parties, you can't do things like that. So like getting to that spot at a later age, so like let's say you're in your college years, like I know so many girls specifically, guys too, but a lot of Syrian girls who weren't allowed to go to Wake for college, right? And I believe that that is such a rite of passage to be an American. Like, I just love the fact that, like, I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to go to Penn State. Like, shout out Penn State. but I'm so thankful that I got a chance to go away to college and get that experience, because I know that there's so many people that never got the opportunity to do that. And that comes from that mindset of survival, right? So like, you can't be away from me. I got to know who your friends are. I got to know where you're going, what you're doing, you know, what you're eating, like all of the aspects of that, and kind of deprogramming ourselves later into adulthood or in our like mid to late 20s to be like, you know, it's safe to do these things. It's not a matter of life or death. Like, it's safe to send my kids away to college. And a lot of us, when we start raising kids and when we start having families of our own, we have to remember that there are things obviously we want to keep in mind, and like obviously safety is number one. And I don't blame our families and our communities. Again, when I say Arab, I mean anything that's not Western, because I feel like we have so much in common with all societies that are not born like just like American by, I don't even know how to say this like politically correct. I'm trying to say this in a way, just like anyone who is not from the US, who has a different skin tone, different culture, different language, we all pretty much have the same like mindset for the most part, collectivistic. So like, you don't belong to yourself, you belong to a unit, essentially. Whereas in the West, it's you belong to yourself and only yourself. You serve one God, you are your, like basically you are your own God, essentially in the West. Whereas in societies where, you know, familial piety is a huge thing. So like in like the Eastern countries, China, India, Middle East, obviously Africa, and even in parts of like South America, it's familial piety over everything. It's like, you know, in Islam, they say, you know, heaven lies at the feet of your mother. And I think that is so beautiful. Like, I can't even like explain how beautiful I think that is. And I think when we take that into consideration and try to translate it into the West, it gets lost sometimes. So being able, again, to kind of bear these in mind where you come here and a lot of things get lost in translation. And there's language barriers, there's cultural barriers, there's like obviously like values, and some people value, you know, career and all of that. Some people don't value that. Some people value more like, again, self-actualization through art and music, which again is beautiful in and of itself and is definitely a career, and I'm not looking at it in any other way, but like some people value education more, right? So just being able to look through those two lenses at the same time is what's going to help you get through it. It's like looking through both of them and having the ability, like in Arabic, for instance, like we write from right to left, and then in English, we write left to right. And one thing that I've realized as I've gotten older, because I did learn how to read and write Arabic in my freshman year of college. So it was really useful because I realized that like your brain also works the same way. You see something from left to right, and then you also can see something from right to left. So you see it from different perspectives, and being able to see things from different perspectives at the same time gives you a clearer vision, my opinion. So like you can see it from the past to the future. You can honor the past and the ancestry and the lines and the sacrifices that have been made up until this point. And then you can also see it in terms of like these grandiose dreams and like these goals and things like that. Whereas a lot of our parents didn't have that. It was just like in Arabic, like kil yoma biyoma, every day in its own, every day for its own. And a lot of them live like that. And that's that part of survival that like sometimes like, yes, it's beautiful to say like each day in of itself, you know, like God give us this daily bread, like just for today. Obviously you pray for it, you're thankful for it, but then at the same time, it's like, it's important to think 25, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. Like you got to do that. Like to think about legacy, talking about generational wealth, talking about these types of things. That's stuff that a lot of people didn't even have access to like hear in conversation. Like those aren't even conversations they would even have. So being able to kind of see both sides of it is just, it's part of that like self-actualizing. Because you kind of get to a point where it's like, I've learned these lessons. I've got them, I've internalized them, I've got them down pat, like I get it. Now what? Now what? Like let's keep it pushing. Let's push the torch forward.
Yeah. I was just kind of thinking how like as you were saying that, my brain started to go back to kind of like how when we're younger, it's just so much harder to see that. And I think you mentioned that in your like what you said a little bit earlier too, where it's like as a kid you're like frustrated, you're like, why can't I go do these things? Like you can't understand your parents' perspective because you're just trying to, you know, like you're surrounded by your peers and your friends, and they're like having the sleepovers, they're doing the things, they're like going away to college with no resistance and stuff like that. Right. And for someone that's coming from like an ethnic background, or like someone that hasn't been like and hasn't had ancestors like for a few generations back in America, it's like a lot of these different like perspectives on how we should operate and raise a family, it's like it's really tough, because it gives you that challenge of like trying to figure out how you can like give yourself that permission to actually go that route and like be a part of it. Because like I remember with my parents when I went to college, like my mom was so mad that I chose to like go away for school. It was like, you know, something that I'm like, everyone else's parents are happy for them because they got into school, and it's like I get accepted into school and the first thing out of your mouth is like, why? It's why? You're supposed to be happy. And so it's like it creates this conflict. It's like, do you want me to be better? Like what, like I, you know, and it's just so interesting how finally when you can like pull yourself out of that, just be like, okay, you know what, now I really, like everything you said, it's like now I have this perspective and I can make sense of a lot of these things. And even now when you kind of meet that in your life, or you meet some kind of opposition or like a frustration with someone where it's like, oh my gosh, like they're like, how can they not see my perspective? You also have to pull back and be like, okay, well, like why are they having difficulty filtering what you said in the way that you want them to? Like what's really going on there? And so rather than just getting mad and blaming them and, you know, having a certain perspective on them, it's like pulling back and being like, okay, you have to honor their journey and their path and what they know in this very moment in time, and come back to yourself and be like, okay, like I honor where you're at and I have to also honor where I'm at. And that doesn't mean like breaking away and like leaving the family or, you know, pulling yourself out of it. I think even before we started recording, you had some like a really good tangent too, where you were going and like, I'm trying to remember the one thing you said that I really liked, or that I really, it was kind of how like different cultures where it's like, okay, like we're not going to like excommunicate our family because we don't agree with their thoughts. Like to us, it's like also very ingrained in us that like that's just not what we do. Like family is in your life regardless. And I feel like when I talk to people who, like I said, are more like have deeper roots in America, it's like that family perspective isn't always held to the same degree of which like we might hold it. But you know, again, that's case by case. I'm not like making a blanket statement, but like certain scenarios where I'll tell a story and people will be like, oh yeah, cut them off, and I'm like, what?
You can't.
I'm like, I don't.
It's like I wish I could explain to you why I can't do that. Like there's a plethora of reasons why I wouldn't be able to do that, but no, it's definitely I feel like when it comes to the family unit, there's something inside of us because we are so deeply understanding. Like you can't run from who you are. Like this is just my personal perspective. I know a lot of people don't. Some people say that you can reinvent yourself, and I do believe that. I don't think that it's not possible for you to reinvent yourself, but your roots will follow you no matter where you are. Like you can't have leaves that touch the sky without roots that reach down to hell. Like I just do not believe that. The further that you dig, the more you'll learn. The more that you want to understand, you will. Like ask and ye shall find. Ask and ye shall receive. Like if you go out and seeking for it and you want to understand your roots, you realize why it's so important to stay connected to them. That's something that either some people see and some people don't. You don't have to do it any which way. There's no like moral like obligation to stay. I mean, I guess that's arguable because there are a lot of religions and even philosophies, like in Confucianism, for instance. I know this, that like in the Chinese government, you can't be in Chinese government until you kind of like swear in under like Confucianist philosophy. So it's not actually a religion there. It's more of a philosophy. And one of the integral like pillars of their philosophy is familial piety. And it's basically like honoring the person that raised you, basically. So like a lot of people, and I mean, we can get into like an entire rabbit hole about that, but like one of the reasons why a lot of their family units are so strong. Now, is sometimes it toxic? For sure. Like we can't sit here, like again, I'm an advocate for human life in all aspects of the word. So if there's somebody that is genuinely harming you mentally, physically, spiritually, like, yeah, sometimes taking a break from somebody is necessary for healing. Like you can't, there's the phrase like, you can't heal in the place that broke you. So there's a lot of people that like, I gotta get out of here. And then get my soul right, get my spirit right, and then I can come back with a clear head and clear conscience and come back and do the work. But for now, I can't do that, and I can't do that here, and I'm just too, like, there's just too much stimulation here, so I can't do it, and that's completely fair. But then when you look at, in terms of like the successful parts that make a human life prosperous, I'll say, and prosperous again, not just financially, but like spiritually, emotionally, all those things, you need a strong family unit. It is what it is. Like, very rarely do you find somebody, okay, maybe I shouldn't even use this blanket statement, but truly, like, I just believe that, like, it's very difficult to find someone who is so happy in everything but doesn't have a strong family or relationship with their family. Like, it's so hard to find someone who is just like, they'll tell you like, yeah, I'm happy, I have this new Ferrari and I have this and I have that, whatever. It's like, okay, great, like, I love that for you, but you haven't talked to your parents in 20 years, and you have an estranged relationship with your siblings, and you know, haven't been to a family reunion in a decade and a half. So it's like, sometimes it's like, I guess, to each his own, like, but for a lot of the people that I surround myself with, almost all of my clients, family is very, very important. And that's something that you can't teach somebody, they have to feel it. That's something that has to be felt. So once those feelings do come, and they, you know, like, you just get to the point where it's like, I've reached the pinnacle of my success. I'm so proud of myself. I've actualized all of my dreams and my visions, and it's awesome. And then you're alone on this mountaintop, and you have nobody to share it with, and you can't look to yourself, look to your left, and be like, you remember when we were like counting pennies when we were younger, and like, look where we're at now. It's like, you have nobody there because you haven't talked to anybody in 20 years. So it's like, just keeping in mind the things that are the most important, and then this need to prove yourself, or this need to actualize things just because you can, I think it gets old real quick. I think it gets old quick, and I feel like a lot of people haven't found that, they haven't felt that feeling yet, and it's okay. And God forbid, I don't want anybody to feel that way, right? I wish we could educate people more on like the importance of building healthy networks and healthy relationships, genuine healthy networks and connections and relationships. But we're a little far from that, unfortunately. But I do have hope that we can get to a point where people can start seeing like your health and your family and your relationships is equally as important as your financial health and your, like, I think we'll get there eventually, but that's one thing that the West needs to catch up on the East with, that they know, because they've covered their roots. Like, they studied their roots, they honor their roots, and I think that's why it works for them in some aspects. Obviously, I won't say all aspects, but in some aspects it does.
Both societies definitely, like, yeah, I think we have a lot to learn from each other, and like opening to that and saying like, okay, you know, neither way has it figured out 100%. Like, I don't think anyone knows everything fully. It's just not possible. And yeah, I think with relationships, that's also a tough one for a lot of people to navigate, because of the pain that you sometimes have to experience in order to really understand. Because I think what can sometimes happen is, when things are difficult, like, I do agree, sometimes it is really important to take space and remove yourself from the situation. And then there's the next element of like, okay, well, like, I perceive this person to be the one that hurt me. And so we block ourselves off from seeing like, well, what role did I play in allowing this to happen? And I think that kind of dips into boundaries a little bit, where it's like, okay, well, I need to get more firm in like what I will and won't tolerate, and I have to see how certain things that I'm saying might be triggering them to react in a certain way that I'm not being conscious of. Because I think unconsciously, especially with families, like, they're gonna be one of your greatest mirrors, and like, you're gonna unconsciously trigger each other. And it's just because it's like what you're used to doing, and it's not usually with intention to inflict harm or to hurt someone. It's really just like this human nature to do this, until you become a little bit more self-actualized and self-aware to see like why you felt compelled to say something or do something the way that you did. So there is a lot there that you can learn. And I know there's a lot of different thoughts or philosophies in psychology where, you know, like I have a really deep belief in like your family has a lot to do with who you are as a person. And I think, and again, I don't know a whole lot about this, but I know my sister has told me like there's many other trains of thoughts that shape your identity, which I do like, I do agree there's definitely more than just one, but I predominantly think through the way of my family. Like that's how I have thought about a lot of what I'm experiencing. And then of course like relationships, because in general relationships, like how you interact with people are going to teach you so much about yourself. And it's really not always projecting and thinking like, oh, this person is this way, this person is this way, this person is this way. Like anything you see in someone else, you are also yourself.
Right.
So it's also having that moment to be like, okay, like I have to acknowledge that as much frustration as I'm having with this person, like I am somehow also embodying some kind of this energy. So I have to really like somehow find that in myself, nourish it, love it, accept it, so that these things don't keep triggering me.
Right.
And so I think that's where you can kind of get past some of the difficulties you might be having with someone else and still be able to have them in your life, is when you can really see that like everything that they're doing, all of their actions are coming from a place of seeking love. And so when you start thinking that way, you can really start to detach from the pain you might have felt from things that they've said or done to you or whatever that might be, because you just have to remember like they're looking for love, and that's all this is, because that's why we interact with people.
You're right. I love that. Yeah, I love that. That's like a really like that one, that bookmark in my head. Like every action is just an action to seek love. In one way or another. I think it's beautiful. Also too, like when you said about the mirror, like truly, I couldn't agree more. Like your family is genuinely the best mirror for you in one way or another. And I feel like when we get to the point where we have outgrown certain aspects, it's more because we're ready to let that go within ourselves, and stop kind of like doing those projections, right? So like that's I actually wanted to ask you what your opinion on, because I've been kind of struggling with it myself, of like everything is you pushed out. So like I heard this quote before, and I've been kind of meditating on it and studying it a little bit, and it really I'm trying to merge the spiritual with the physical, right? So like I do believe we're mind, body, soul all happening at the same time, like spirit and stuff, but like this concept of everything is you pushed out. So like when something's triggering you or something happens, or you know some stimuli on in the external happens, it's always, this is like the theory is that it's always because it's something within you that's trying either to come out or manifest itself or trying to get your attention somehow. So I wanted to hear your perspective on that, because again, there's a lot of ideas and theories kind of going around, and I would like to make my decision on kind of like how to think about that.
Yeah, I like this thought, because I would say that's kind of in line with what I do believe, because it's so much more of an empowering thought to think of it that way, because it gives you control over the reality you're experiencing. So when you're saying that like, okay, if everything is me, if I'm operating from this place where no matter what I experience, like I have the power to heal that or alter it or change it, then you're operating from this place of like, okay, like I can conduct myself. And if you're like, the hard part is like, it's not fun to do the work and to look in. Like I always tell people, this is my phrase of like, it's not a rainbows and butterflies process, but it will get you to rainbows and butterflies.
Right, for sure.
So it's like that thing where, okay, yeah, this person, whatever it might be, like as bad as it could be, like it is showing you something within you that like you deeply value, or it's showing something in you that is not healed. It's showing that there's an emotion in there that needs to be processed. And so rather than like pressing it down, because I think that's also another big thing, but that'll send me on another tangent, but like, yeah, I think so much of what we experience and how we perceive these experiences is because of the lens that we're looking through, which is like our mind, our brain, our traumas, our past, everything, all of this. And now as you navigate this life, you're kind of like, yeah, you're like letting things out. You're letting things that need to be worked and moved through you. Like you store so much of what you've experienced within you and it's unconscious.
Right.
Like,
right.
You don't realize that all of these, you don't even have, like, you know, I couldn't even sit here. Like, sure, I sit and think about myself a lot, like, or like I think about, right? Like, I work on myself a lot in that way where I like really meditate on like a lot of my actions and like give myself the space to think about these things that I know not everyone has the luxury to do, but I spend a lot of that time. And like, even me, it's like I'm not gonna know everything in the moment that it happens and comes up. But that's why I think it's like so important to give yourself the space to do that, because like if these things just keep happening but you never take the time to create spaciousness in your day at some point, or even in your week somewhere, like you're never gonna really understand what's happening and like how you can use that principle to your advantage to actually help you construct a better reality and make yourself like a happier person, truly.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that I think part of doing the work is allocating that time. Part of doing the work is allocating, even if it's not something like insane, like, okay, you know, like training for a marathon or something like that. Like I feel like when you're looking at the physical aspect of doing the work, it's so much easier to quantify. Whereas like doing the work on the internal level is not easily quantifiable. Like you can't say, like, I can't tell you on like a scale that like, oh, last time I didn't get as angry, it was only like this much, or it's like it's not as easily quantifiable. So allocating that time at the very least is something that we can kind of like in practical terms of like, how do you execute doing the work? What does doing the work look like? How do you kind of like rearrange your internal world to make the external world look good? And you have to do that by really taking stock of like what these things are triggering, what your actions are, why you reacted in certain ways. And I hear all the time, like, you know, circumstance is never as important as your response to the stimuli. So being able to like, I mean, I'm a huge advocate for journaling. I think it, honest to God, like saved my life at a point. And just being able to really, like, in the midst of like a mental breakdown, just like writing out and like watching my thoughts as they're coming out. It's like this like free flow of energy, and like watching my thoughts and be like, whoa, I don't think this. Like it's so hard to like disconnect yourself and not identify with the thoughts that are going through your head. And I feel like a lot of people don't realize that like you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts come to you. You are like this like receptor of thoughts, and you're like this like antenna, and ideas and thoughts and things flow to you, and you can choose if you want to accept them into your space, or you can choose to kind of kick those thoughts out. And but the identifying with the thing, with the thoughts, especially if they're like maladaptive thoughts, if they're thoughts that like don't serve you, don't serve your purpose, don't serve your dreams and goals and missions, like it's so much easier to be able to like allocate that time and be like, I'm just gonna let the divine flow through me for a second. And just like, I'll give myself 30 minutes, put some lo-fi beats on, and just like, you know, just like start with how my day was, and like, oh yeah, wait, by the way, like this is how I felt, and like this is what I was, you know, I don't remember why I got mad at her, but like I got mad at her, and like blah blah. And just like allowing yourself, and then you can sit back and see, and just like, okay, this is where I realize this is at the point where my maladaptive thoughts come through, or something like that. And just being able to like put that time aside, and that's what you quantify. That's how we can start like building. And I'm just like going on, because what you said really got me thinking. Like, I never looked at it the way that you're like, I never articulated it the way that you're looking at it, but I've always saw it like that, right? So like now that you're articulating it, I'm hearing it outwards, I'm like, yeah, like that's absolutely right. That is what considers doing the work. That's when you sit there with yourself and you just kind of like take stock of yourself and your actions and your behaviors, and that's how you like straighten out and iron out the inner world to allow the outer world to reflect what your desires would be, right? So I guess the inner world is you pushed out. I guess we can say that. It's just hard to considering like natural disasters and things that you can't explain, and like we can kind of look through it in like this, like, again, from a place of privilege, right, and safety and security and, you know, love and family. We can look at it from this place of privilege and be like, yes, this is beautiful, but then we see kind of like what's happening right now and like around the world, not just like, you know, wars and poverty and things like that. Just like, is this me pushed out though? Like, am I creating this? Like, am I seeing like well, I can, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's kind of like, again, battling that like old world versus new world kind of understanding of reality. Like there are like, obviously we can never, under what you said earlier, we'll never understand. We can sit here and talk until kingdom comes, you and I, and we'll throw around these amazing ideas and these amazing things, but like truly, truly, does anyone really know? I'm not like, I don't, we can, you know what I mean? But it's like seeing that type of stuff. And I get really emotional with stuff like this. I really do. And I try my hardest to kind of like separate my emotions from my ego and like try to like make those distinctions. But it's so hard sometimes. It's so hard, especially seeing stuff like, you know, natural disasters and war and stuff. So
Yeah, that's definitely, I'm with you. Like, I think that's where sometimes my sister calls it like you're just deep in it too much, where it's like, oh, like, yeah, it is a really beautiful principle and you can apply it to so many ways in your life in a positive way, but certain things where it's like, okay, you know, I'm not sure. Like, I would have to really probably sit and think about that element of like natural disaster a little bit more. But yeah, certain things where it's like, what could I have done differently, really, to make this a different reality?
right.
And it's like there's certain things where that's where, to me, like my destiny beliefs come in.
Right.
It's like I don't know why this happened, but for whatever reason it had to happen this way, and like there was nothing that I could have thought differently about or done differently or chosen differently. Like this thing happened for that reason. And I think it's like that goes to discernment, where it's like I have to decide, like, is this something that I should put my energy towards in an internal way, or is this calling me to connect deeper to something else or to look at this in a different way? And so it's really just picking and choosing what you believe like is under your control and what is something that is out of your control.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. No, I do. I love that. I like, do you want to keep it internal or not? I love that. Like then you're kind of like pulled into more of like kind of like on the frontier level. Like you're kind of like, all right, I'm not going to internalize this. It is what it is. And I truly believe that's one of the most powerful phrases that you could ever say, is like, it is what it is. Now what? Like not even now what, just it is what it is. It could not be anything other than what it is. So it is what it is. And then it gives you, again, back to like that empowered thing, like now you're empowered to kind of push that energy. Like again, energy is not created nor destroyed, it's just transmuted, it's just transformed into something different. So like we have this negative energy. How do we alchemize this? How do we transform this into positive energy? We have to do something, right? So like one thing of like the natural disaster that just happened in Syria, the earthquake, you can choose to look at it and just sit there and sulk and mourn and be absolutely like devastated, which a lot of us were, right, for like a split second. And then some, like I had to make that active decision of being like, I want to and will alchemize this energy. How do I do so? And that was only through, and I guess you can call it savior complex, you can say whatever. I'm trying to like, you know, work my way through it, which is like I can't do everything all at once. Like, you know, we say like my favorite question to me, like you can't hug the world. And just being mindful of that, being okay, what can I do? What do I have in my control? What can I do in my power to do? And kind of alchemizing that negative energy, making it somewhat of a positive. And then you start seeing like, wow, people are literally pouring out of the woodworks to come to help a country that like you couldn't otherwise point on a map. And people are literally coming from all over to aid people in need. And that to me is alchemized energy. That is something of choosing to look on the better side of whatever natural disaster it is, instead of internalizing that and being like, oh, this is my reality. It's like, why not choose to look at your reality as like, wow, we are such a progressive, like empathetic people, and we wish to help, and looking at it through that lens as opposed to looking at it through the other. And that's in our control, right? So like that's what we can control. We can't control circumstances, but our perception and our response to them. So being able to keep that in mind. But I really do, that one I'm definitely, I should have had my notebook out, because I totally wanted to write that one down, but I'll keep a mental note for that. And I'll listen to this podcast.
I know, like this is a conversation that I'm like, I will have to definitely, I mean, like I do listen back to every episode I post, because I'm like, sometimes it's just like, yes, we say really profound things. Going back to the journaling, like, yeah, I have moments all the time where I'm like, yeah, journaling is so powerful. And like, I look back at things that I thought and said and expressed, and I'm like, wow, like I've been having these thoughts, I've been expressing these emotions and feelings, and like, now I'm gonna take action on it. Like, oh, I always am amazed when I look back at my own like journaling prompts. Not in the way where I think I'm like magical, but it's more of the synchronicities of like my own life and my own internal guidance
Right.
that maybe I question at times, but I come back and I'm like, no, this has always been true for me.
Right.
And so it's just reminding yourself of that too. And yeah, I mean, I feel like there's just so many things we could go on and on about.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I know now we're like
yeah, no, for sure. It's like one thing leads to another, and like it's that's the beauty of dialogue, though. It's so cool. Yeah. It's so cool. I love this.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We didn't even get to talk too much about your professional life, but I think at the same time, so much of like what we talked about, I feel like has so much of an influence on like really what your career is and what it means to you. Because like, to me, anyone that pursues life coaching, it's like usually because something within your personal life really compelled you to follow your soul and to be someone that like shares their story and kind of like lets people feel the magic, and you're taking the time to do the work, and to so many people that's so inspiring. And yeah, like I love that. And so you can definitely tell that your heart and your energy is like in everything that you do. And yeah, like I've always admired like how much of an activist you are, truly. Like I'm always seeing like, oh my gosh, like she's really doing it. Like this makes me feel like I need to step up and like go do something. And so yeah, just like voicing that and letting people know what you're doing, whether it's a God complex or not. But at the same time, it's like, whatever, like you could look at this situation through whatever lens so like you so please when you hear it. But it's really like we can do so much just as one person. And like, even though we are just one person, it's like sometimes we kind of lose sight of what that actually means. But yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, and I think that this will create a really beautiful ripple effect when people listen to it, and hopefully they're inspired and they inspire someone else, and then it just keeps going down the chain, and we just keep lifting humanity up.
Yeah, awesome. So well said. Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, I really do. I would love to also plug one last plug for the evening.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But the basketball league is an incredible milestone that we are doing here in the Lehigh Valley. And I'm honored to be the life coach of the professional basketball team. And honestly, it is something that is really changing the culture here. And doing things on an individual level is awesome, but no man is an island. And I think that the ripple effect that you're talking about is really seeping through so many aspects and so many facets of society. I would like to think it's because of social media, and I think that's one of the good things about social media. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people aren't huge fans of social media, but I do see some of the good benefits to it. But the Lehigh Valley Legends is honestly an incredible organization that I am so thankful to be working for. They are doing so many great things in their own foundation as well, like with the youth in Allentown. As you know, like Allentown is an underserved community. So we're kind of like, about 85% of the population is under the poverty line. So like there's a lot of things here that we can do on a grassroots effort to help with self-actualization. I believe that these types of organizations and these events and the things that you do to get involved in your own hometown, I think that's what helps you get there. So that's like something that I've found for actually, I'm not even gonna take the credit for this. This is all God. Seriously, this was all God. It had nothing to do with me. But if anybody is listening, when you listen to anyone on a podcast, the number one thing that I would recommend is like take action. Like do something that makes the world around you just 1% better. Anything that we can do, that's my hope, is to inspire somebody. If you're inspired to do anything, is to take action. Hopefully in a good action. But it's like amazing. This conversation has honestly opened up so many like light bulbs, so many doors in my brain. And I was just like, wow, I never saw it like that, or I've never heard it articulated like this. I'm like, this is so cool. So like, I'm so thankful that you had me here, and this was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And likewise, I feel the same, where it's so many things we said and so many things that you said. It's planting like a lot of seeds in my brain that I'm excited to see where they blossom and flourish once I am able to kind of sit down and think a little bit more. Because that's what I love to do when you have such a good conversation. You know, probably tomorrow I'll go on a walk and then like I'll be like, yeah, that thing she said. Or maybe like 3 weeks from now something will happen. I'll be like, oh my gosh, this reminds me of that thing Hazel said. So I think it's really, yeah, I just love that. Just being open and receptive, and yeah, these little things that you really let yourself be open to, like, can really take you somewhere beautiful if you allow it to. So it's really just, again, it's that permission that it's like you just surround yourself with the positive energy, you listen to podcasts, social media, all of that, like curate it so that it's like nourishing you rather than hurting you, really, which we feel like, yeah. So I think it's like you can make the tool, going back to the point we had in the beginning, it's like use the tool as you please. It can be something that helps you. You can choose whether you want it to be that way or not. So
right, for sure.
Yeah, so if people want to follow along with your journey, where can they find you?
The best place to find me, I would say, is on my website, www.hazelswaid.com, SWAID.com. And I do have a blog, so you're more than welcome to check that blog out. I'm trying to stay a little bit more active on that. And then my Instagram, at Hazel Swaid. So I don't have an Instagram. I don't have a Facebook. I don't have a Snapchat. And I don't have a Twitter. So I'm not on any of those platforms, nor am I on YouTube. So really just those two, just my blog and my Instagram, is pretty much the only place that you would be able to kind of like follow along. But I'm hopefully would love to get on TikTok soon. So that was the next one.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll link that in the show notes so people will be able to access that. And again, thanks so much for coming on the show. I can't wait for people to hear this. I think it's going to do a lot of beautiful things in people's lives, whether it's the same day that they listen to it or whether it's weeks, years from now, this will come to their mind. And yeah, I'm excited for that.
Thank you so much.